Okay. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us today. Just a quick reminder, and actually a new thing I decided to do last minute. So that's why I only started advertising it last night at, I don't know, like 9 o'clock at night. I'm doing a 30 minutes, no longer, right? Big on the sign. I don't know if you saw the flyer, big 30 minutes, right? 30 minutes insights into Purim today at 12:15 for 30 minutes. We're going to talk about different ideas about Purim. So please join me on Zoom, and we'll allow questions and answers afterwards for anybody that wants to stay on. So please join me for that today at 12:15. I'm going to talk about Esther. We'll talk about Mordechai. We'll talk about the whole Purim story, but we're going to keep it to 30 minutes, no longer. I'm going to have a stopwatch. 30 minutes, that's it. Even if I'm mid-word. No, not exactly. But it was on the 8th last night. Yeah, it's fine last night. And I will put it again today after the class, a reminder. Same Zoom link as this. So it's a general Zoom link because this is sort of our domain name. So same Zoom link. It's not a separate sign up kind of thing. So, excuse me, please join us for that. Okay, now let's get cracking. So I want to start off with a very interesting quote. So we're starting chapter 3 in the book. How we finished chapter 2 last week, up to chapter 3. And I want to start off with the quote of 125, and then we'll talk a little bit about the paragraph right after it says chapter 3, and then we'll get into the halacha. Very interesting things today. So if you look at the quote on 125, it's from the Chavos Halvavos. Right, Chavos Halvavos was a book authored in the 1300s, somewhere like that. Chavos Halvavos, around the 1300s, give or take. So it's written by a Rishon, and it's Chavos Halvavos is duties of the heart. I think that's how English translated it. I don't know. You could look it up. Duties of the heart. Right, I think they have it now. Art Scroll probably translated, or Feldheim probably translated into English. It's 2 volumes. It's unbelievable. And he quotes like this: "It is most surprising that by nature man is embarrassed before other people, but not before his creator. Though the latter, right, observes himself at all times. Right, Hashem observes us all the time." Right, so it's a mind-boggling thing to stop and think about for a minute. Right, we all know, right? There's the famous jokes. So you all have to laugh now, okay? Because it's a joke. The famous joke I think I said it one time at a sermon when Fish was out of town. All right, let's call the guy Mike. All right, Mike is he's kosher observant, but you know he's having a midlife crisis and he wants to taste pork. That's it. He wants to taste pork. All right. So he does his research and he found like 60 miles away, an hour away, right, in a town, they have a great, unbelievable restaurant, and they're supposed to have like the best kind of pork. And there's no Jews in that town, so he doesn't have to worry about bumping into anybody. So he goes, right, he takes the day off. He goes there, he sits down, and he's looking at the menu, and they say like full pork, this and that. And he buys, right, the Ganze Megillah, right, the whole fanciest and most expensive pork. He's gonna do this, right? He's gonna do it right. All right, so he goes ahead and he's waiting, and finally they bring it him. They bring this big pork with an apple in the mouth and whatever, and he's about to start cutting, and all of a sudden, Chaim Yankel walks in. Right? Chaim Yankel walks in, and Chaim Yankel says, "Oh, Mike, what are you doing?" He says, "Oh, Chaim Yankel, what are you doing here?" She said, "Well, I was traveling through and I ordered an apple, and look what they gave me." Right? So, we all embarrassed of our fellows, right? Of our fellow Jew, whatever it is. If it's in our religion, it depends where we're holding, right? And to a certain degree, it's good. I've had people very, very, sometimes said, "Oh, Rabbi, I'm so embarrassed the way I'm dressed. If I bump into them at the JCA, or if I knock on the door to, some people, right, to have that sensitivity, as we call it." Right? It's a sensitivity comes from a little embarrassment, which is a good thing sometimes because it keeps us in the straight and narrow, right? To a certain degree, right? But at the same time, right? As the Chavetz Savav says, if we really think about it, and I'm talking to myself too, right? Very much to myself, right? We really, the person we should be embarrassed of all the time is God, right? But we're not, right? Why is that? Why is that? So I want to talk about this for a couple of minutes. I know it's not, we're going to get to Lashon Hara in a minute, but if we're able to work on this, right, then this is one of the ways of working on Lashon Hara, right? Because we're not going to go through the whole thing on 123, but I want to do the first couple of lines. It says, Shlomo HaMelech teaches us that when we face grave challenges, we shall wage war for ourselves with strategy, right? We have to use our strategy. Shlomo HaMelech says in Keheles also that I found that we had a strong person, right? A young, strong person, but a wise, old person. I'll go with the wise, old person more than the young, strong person. Because Shlomo HaMelech teaches us that a lot of times it's not brute force or strength, it's intellect of how to be able to overcome things. So one of the ways in general and everything, but also with Lashon Hara, to try to overcome it is realizing that Hashem is everywhere. And he's on our smartphones, right? Even though, probably Hashem would say, we have to have a kosher phone, right? But, he's still there. He's on our smartphone. He's on our couches. He's in our bed. He's everywhere, right? If we lock ourselves up in a bunker, right? 20 feet on the ground, the cement steeled, right? Doesn't make a difference. God is everywhere. So in essence, if we are able to really think about it, right, and connect to this concept of being embarrassed or, not realizing that Hashem is truly everywhere, then we also won't be speaking Lashon Hara as much and other things, right? But we won't be speaking Lashon Hara as much. So I just want to talk about this for a couple of minutes, right? Why is it that we are not embarrassed in front of God, right, as we are in front of humans? And if we can understand why we're not, then we'll be able to start working on to make ourselves more embarrassed or aware, right, of God. So you have to know for our doctors in the crowd, right, or our medical professionals, right, you have to first know what the symptoms are to be able to treat the symptoms. So we have to know why is it that we don't feel God all the time, right, to be able to try to take care of that. And there's many different approaches throughout history. Many different rabbis have said many different things, and this is not a new thing that we deal with, right? The prophet said many times, "Hayesh Hashem b'kurbechem or lo imlo." Is Hashem in your hearts or not? Right? Many times throughout history, we've been challenged. Right? Is Hashem within you? Last week's Torah portion, right? Parshas Truma, famous Dvar Torah, right? It's not a Dvar Torah, it's a Yisod, it's a foundation, right? It says, "Va'asuli mikdash, make for me a mikdash, u'shachanti b'sochem, and I'll rest amongst you," right? The commentaries explain that God rests amongst each one of us. He's in our hearts. He's within each one of us, right? B'sochem, amongst you. And so this idea that God, is everywhere. God is intrinsically part of us, our neshama. 1 second. All right. Yeah, I'm fine. Just have a tickle in my throat. All right. So God is, God is everywhere, right? It's a fundamental belief. And it's a fundamental belief because if we're able to capitalize on that, our whole way of looking at things will be different. So why is it that we don't think about it all the time? So we've talked about this in the past, that God created, and this ties into Purim. We're going to touch about it a little bit this afternoon's class, but not really touching about this in this point. We talked about it in the morning minute a little bit, but really God created the concept of nature to make it appear that he's not around. Because if we truly saw God in every aspect, we saw God pulling the strings, literally, right? So then, as we've said many times, we wouldn't have any free will. And the purpose that God created this world for us is to have free will, is to make that choice. Right? So if we would see God in every aspect, we would have an internal recognition of God and an awareness, right? And a reality, that's a better word, a reality of God in our daily lives, just because that's how it is and not because we worked on creating it, then we would have no free will. And we have no free will, bless you, and we've had no free will, so then it defies the whole purpose of our existence in this world. So if you really think about it, this quote that the surprising by nature that man is embarrassed before other people, but not before his creator, really, it's not surprising at all. That's how God created it. God created it that we don't have the reality of God. We have a knowledge of a concept of a God. And the more we work on it, the more we build, it's a muscle, then more becomes the reality. But initially, God created nature. God created our daily lives, a routine that we don't think about God all the time, because otherwise we'd have no free will. So then what's the answer to the question? If that's the reason, so the answer to how to make sure that we do create God, right, in our lives all the time, right, is to make sure to build our emunah, to build our faith. Simple. We have to build. It's not simple to work on building our faith, right? Trust me, it's a life's work, right? But it's building our faith. And as we've said many times, not all or nothing. The more we build our faith, and I promise you, if you reflect internally in yourself, and everyone here, I know everyone here is holding on different levels, coming from different backgrounds, right? Have had different interactions, let's say in the last 7.5 years since we've come to town, right? With me, right? With other people. And I want each one of you to stop and reflect for a minute. And we've all gone up and down. Me also, right? It's a seesaw. We've all gone up and down. We hope that we go as, one step backwards, 2 steps forwards, or 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards, and you're constantly growing, right? But we've all had our little ups and downs. I want you all to stop and reflect for a second. Do a fact check on yourself. Everybody's into fact checks, right? Facebook fact check, this fact check, right? Everybody's into fast checks, right? So I want you to do a fact check on yourself. When you are more involved in your Judaism, right? You're able to come to services, or you attend classes online, right? You are saying Tehillim in your home, right? You're learning with your children. You're saying the Shema every night, right? You're making a blessing over your food, right? Whatever it is, whenever you're more involved in your Judaism and reflecting on your Judaism, the more you are aware of God and the more you refrain from doing certain things. You're keeping yourself in check. When we don't do that, then we start slipping, and then it's easier for us to do certain things that we might not have done, wherever the person's holding. If it's going to a mixed water park, right? If it's going to go into a non-kosher restaurant, if it's going to only a vegetarian restaurant, if it's wearing my kippah more, if it's remembering to say blessings, if it's whatever it is, whatever it is, right? Wherever we're all holding in different places. I want you to think about it for a second and realize that the more we are involved, why do we have to come to services? Why do we have to be I'll do everything online, right? COVID has been a tremendous either growth for people, or unfortunately I have colleagues all over the United States and Canada, right? Whatever, Canada's really part of the United States, right? But really colleagues all over the place, England too, right? That have said that they've seen that there's no middle of the road with COVID. Either people have connected through online classes or have reached out, or they've done things themselves, to strengthen themselves. If they haven't been motivated by themselves to connect to the opportunities that are out there, then they've digressed a lot, because they don't have their foundations. They don't come to shul. In most places, a lot of cities, schools are not open still, or even if they are, very limited, right? They don't come to shul. They don't hang out with people. They don't have guests. And that's their foundation. That's the thing. And when you lose that in the beginning, okay, but then you start slipping. You start slipping on this. You start slipping on that. So you all have to, and myself too, do a fact check on ourselves and realize that we have an answer to this. Our answer is that we have to be proactive in our building our relationship, our emunah with God, doing actions, because as we said so many times, Judaism is the actions, not the thought. We want to have our thought to our actions of knowing what we're doing, right? And reflecting and growing. But Judaism is all about the action. We have to shake the lulav and etzah. We have to eat the matzah. We have to read the Megillah. We have to go ahead and give mishloach manos. We have to go ahead and drink on Purim, only if you're allowed, right? Whatever it is, right? Our mitzvahs are our actions. We make blessings. We use our mouth. We use our hands. We use our body, right? Because that's how we bring God back into our lives. Awaken for ourselves that God's in our lives. And that, my friends, is how you answer the Chavis Avavas's problem. And that's something that's so crucial. As right before the class, I was talking to Sima, I think it was Sima, right? That it's almost a year now, right? Purim was the last big event that we had. And even then, we thought people like, oh, we had servers, right? And they were wearing gloves, right? They're like, oh my gosh. So I was like, we're being so, right? Now it's like unheard of, right? We do outdoor things or whatever it is. It's a year. And if we don't reflect internally, we don't catch ourselves, and we don't realize that we have to strengthen within ourselves and take opportunities and build that, then what happens, then we lose that embarrassment of God. We lose our recognition of God, that awareness of God. That's how God did it. It's our free will. And then we spiral. And each one of us can reflect internally. Again, we all have had our ups and downs. So that's sort of a thought that one really has to reflect on. And this is especially also for Lashon Hara, right? By learning the laws, right? By coming to these classes, by becoming more aware, right? I know myself, I've refrained from saying certain things. I want to say something, or been more conscious about my kids, right? How they say things. We're talking about it more, right? And myself too, become more aware of it, because I'm learning it now every week. Right? Learning it every week. Because the more you make something, the more you become aware of it. And that's something very, very important to be aware of. Okay, let's just talk briefly of the paragraph of chapter 3, and then we'll go to page 122. Any questions or comments on what we just spoke about? Okay, good. Okay, so I just want to talk about the paragraph for a couple of minutes, and then we'll move on. All right. One of the big things, especially in not only in Lashon Hara, but especially in Lashon Hara, right, is that a lot of times people doubt themselves. Right? People doubt themselves. Who am I? Right? The gap between knowing what's right and doing it can sometimes seem to be an impossible leap. What will people think? Who am I to speak up? Right? The big surprise is that often we discover that when, right, controversial efforts into a dangerous territory, conversation veers into a dangerous territory, people are grateful to be propped into a higher road. Little courage can go a very long way, saving someone's reputation and saving ourselves and others from damaging a fellow Jew. Right? So this, guys, is so important, right? So important, right? Not only for Lashon Hara, but in everything, right? I've had people, and again, no judgment, God forbid, and every person on their own level and every person in their own growth, right? But I've had, let's say, someone trying to encourage them to wear their kippah more often. But what's my partner's going to think? What is, right? Thank God, yes. If you're going to some place where you know it's anti-Semitism and you know you're right, so then that's one thing. But thank God, the country that we live in overall, right, and most people in your workplace, they know you, this, that. You wear a kippah, they're not going to start slurring about you. On the contrary, they're going to respect you. And they say, oh, what are you doing? Say, oh, well, I just learned about it. It's something, I'm growing in my Judaism, and this is something that we do, right, to recognize that God's above us. They will respect you because you're standing up for what you believe. Right? They will respect you. Right? Same thing, going places or doing things and keeping to your standards. And wherever one is, within your friends, right? If your friends decide, oh, let's go to a certain place and it's below your standards, don't allow yourself to be pressured in, right? That's below my standards. It's not what I do. And then you never know. If you decide to stand up, they might say, okay, so let's go somewhere else. And then besides protecting yourself, you're actually helping someone else. because they're not going to that club. They're not going to that bar. That bar is too rowdy for me. Let's go to another place, a nice place. We can have a drink, right? A good ambiance, nice music in the background, nothing crazy, right? Not saying not to go out, but you have to know it's within your boundaries, right? So, and especially with Lashon Hara, right? Who am I, right? What will people think, and who am I to speak up? Those are things that we have to constantly think about. Don't underestimate yourself. Don't underestimate yourself, right? Because sometimes we have to do what's right, and if there's a backlash, so be it. Unfortunately, you know what? Then you don't want to be friends with those people, right? You shouldn't hate them. You have to love every person, but you change you'll realize that that's not the people you want to hang out with all the time, because it's not your crowd. It's not the people that want to hang out all the time. Okay, so we did a lot of hashkafa today. Very important things. All right, let's get cracking in halacha. All right, so let's turn to page 122. Very interesting dilemma. All right, very interesting dilemma. Something that happens, right, very often. Right, and we're going to bring it out in two different ways. Right, so let's like this. Your girlfriend. Oh, your good friend. What happens if it's not your good friend? What happens if it's your friend? Right? Okay. Right? Your good friend. They always write your good friend. Right? Your good friend has finally found an apartment. Right? Housing, it's hard, right? Finding, especially in the shtetl, right? It's hard, right? We have some of the best realtors in our community, right? But finally, Baruch Hashem, you found an apartment, you found the house, right? Right location, mom is next to good families, right? That's mom is gewaldig, right? Another hard word to translate in English, right? You know that you're right, it's the right price, blah, 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 right? But you know that the landlord, and I don't know why landlady, but the landlord, right? A former workmate of yours is a difficult, argumentative, emotional, unhealthy person. You're always quite certain that you're also quite certain that your ever optimistic friend will brush off the information if you share with her. May you warn her. All right, so this happens many times. And I want to read you the words of the Chafetz Chaim. Right? The Chafetz Chaim says, this is something that's very common when people are asking other people for information. Right? Right? They decide to give information, but not necessarily the person will listen to that thing, or that's not what they ask. If you nicker, even if it's something that you're not sure, listen or not. And not only that, he says a lot of times what's going to happen, and this is human nature, right? That the other person will go ahead and tell someone else that, that person said I asked them for information about you, right? You know what they said? They said, you're an okay person. You're a little stingy, right? You have some good qualities, but sometimes get hot-tempered, right? Whatever it is. And if you know, and so many times when you know, or you have a concern that the other person is not going to listen to you, you also have to have a concern that they might go ahead and now tell someone else, right, that what you said about them, right? So the halacha is, as I already almost explained, but you could just read, we're only allowed to speak to us if there's a reasonable chance that we will achieve our goal. Right? You're not allowed to go ahead and tell someone something, even if it's a talus, even if it's something that's detrimental. Right? This person is a cheat. This person is, God forbid, a dangerous person. But if they're not going to listen to you, so then you're not accomplishing anything. You're not accomplishing anything, and all you're doing is creating animosity. And as we said, it might come back and bite you. And that's another thing of Lashon Hara. Right? Another thing of Lashon Hara is, as we said, if you remember, we went to the extent of, let's say you said something, that person's not going to say anything, and then you feel bad. So you want to go and ask that person mechila, forgiveness, right? Say, oh, you know what I said about you? You're not allowed to. Remember, we said you're not allowed to, because then you're going to create the other person to be upset at you, because now they know what you said about them. Because the other person's, they're a seal. They're people that you can trust, and they don't say anything. So you're not even allowed to go ahead and ask Mechila about this specific thing. We said you should ask it in general and other things. So if you know, A, the person's not going to listen to you, or the Chafetz Chaim then goes and adds, and even if they will listen to you, even if he will listen to you, and you know the nature of this person. And let's be honest, we know people, right? You know the person that's the blabber, right? You know the person that if you want to get all the juicy information, you go to them. I'm not supposed to say anything, but right? I heard I was sworn to secrecy, but right? Unfortunately, we know those people, right? You know people that are more easier on the tongue, even if they don't mean it. They have people that don't do it on purpose. It's just easier on the tongue. They have a hard time controlling. They speak and they have a hard time controlling themselves. Says the Chafetz Chaim, even if you will listen to him, you know the nature of this person. These guys will go ahead and speak Rachel, as we said, a peddler. He will peddle the information, right? And everybody will know that this person gave this person advice. So ligmar se'inyan, this is prohibited. Not allowed to. So first of all, one has to reflect internally. You want to get advice from people, and you're going to listen, right? And you have to make sure that you are a person that people know that will not peddle information, because then other people really are not allowed to help you out to give advice about other people. Because if you're going to go ahead and peddle, I just had this great conversation with Chaim Yankel, right? And he really helped me out with Yankel Pfefferkorn, right? On how to deal with our business. I'm telling you, Chaim Yankel is a great mayayitz. He's told me how to deal with the problems. And so he's complimenting him, right? And he's saying that but at the same time, he's now peddling the information to other people. He just doesn't know how to control himself, him or her. So number one, the person that is giving, if someone come over to me and say, listen, I'm sorry, I can't really help you out. Why not? Because unfortunately, I know that you're not going to be able to control yourself. Maybe it's not your fault. You won't be able to control yourself. The whole community is going to know what advice I gave you, how to deal with X, Y, and Z. I'm sorry. You're going to make this big post on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is. Thank you so much, Rabbi Feigenbaum, for helping me out how to deal with this person. He gave me great advice. Oh, it's on Facebook. It's fine. It's a post. I didn't really tell anybody. I did it anonymous. You have to be so careful. And this is something that's unfortunately, as the Chafetz Chaim says, the tiva adam, the nature of people. That's one aspect. The other aspect is, right, as we said, if they're not going to listen to you, then there's no toelis. And sometimes you say, well, if I really, if I really, really tell them how serious the situation is, you know what? This is a good litmus test to check how much influence you have in that individual. And don't knock yourself out and beat yourself up if you don't. Listen, different people have different influences on different people. And if you don't have that level of influence that they can actually listen to you, or you know that you do have that influence, but it's something that they really want, and that's why I think they gave this example. Listen, we need the house. It's in our price range, right? It's good neighbors, whatever it is. Maybe the landlord is a difficult person, but we'll just have to deal with it, right? But, they take your advice. They respect you. But for this piece of information, it just doesn't wait for them. They're just not able to act on that information right now because they have other circumstances that are greater. And you know that. So even if they're your confidants, even though they usually listen to you, you have to make sure that you give advice or information that will be realistically listened to also.
You can't say it.
You can't. Right? Very good, Emily. You can't say it. And this, my friends, a lot of times plays a role also, right? In situations of, trying to comfort someone that's going through something, right? You might be giving them information or advice that makes them feel better, but if they're not able, it's just a way of comforting them. And that's another thing, how to deal with that. Comfort is an important thing, but if they're not able to act on what you give them advice or the information you give them, let me tell you about what that person did to you. And I know you're in a fight with that person, but and I want to help you how to deal with that. But they never knew about that thing, right? They might find out later, but they never knew, and they're not able to do anything about it anyways. You're not really helping them out either. Not really helping them out either. All right, so this is something that has many, many ramifications, many legs and ways of it coming into fruition, right? The bottom line is that if the person's not going to listen to you, however way, if it's advice, if it's because of a situation, it's because they don't trust you or they trust you, but for this piece of information, it's not enough. Whatever the reason is, right? You're not allowed to tell them the information. Number two, they will listen to you and they might even act upon it, but they're going to peddle that information, and you know that, and you're not allowed to either. Not allowed either. And you can tell the person, listen, I'm so sorry, I want to help you, but unfortunately I can't. And if, let's say, they say, listen, I'm really, and you trust them that they will keep their mouth quiet on this thing, and you trust them that they will, so then you could. If they go, so then next time when they trust, they say they're not gonna, you can't trust them, and that person loses faith, and that person loses out, because then they can't get advice from other people. That's one very important halacha. Right, and let's jump to the next halacha, and then we'll come back to the quote of the other page. I want to end with the quote of the other page. Right, another interesting halacha. Right, similar concept, but a little different. Right, your neighbor unfortunately is very harsh to his children. You often witness him shouting at them and hitting them. Right. Excessively. Right, and again, it all depends on times. Right. When I grew up, right, and I know there's people on here that grew up way before me, right? When I grew up, it was normal, to get, my Rebbe used to give us a kick in the pants, it was, it was normal to get slapped across the face, right? Normal, but it was acceptable, right? I'm not saying that ever happened to me, right? But I guess it's all relative to that time or to that way of dealing with things. Right, you often witness him shouting at them and hitting them, right? And you're worried about the children's mental and physical well-being. Should you speak to his Rav about the situation, or first address the issue directly with your neighbor? All right, so you're allowed to speak to the Rav, as we said beforehand. It's Toelas, right? It's Toelas for the kids, right? And as long as the Rav is going to act upon it based off the rule beforehand, right? The Rav says, I don't know, I can't really deal with that person, or that person's a bully and he bullies the Rav also. And unfortunately, sometimes we have those kind of people that don't listen to the Rav, right? And therefore, it's not going to help by telling the Rav anything, because Rav's hands are tied also, because the Rav could say something, but then it's not, unless the Rav could, and it's really bad and the Rav could call, child services and things like that. Better to do it through the Rav to do that than just you directly call child services. It should be done through, a Jewish avenue, right? And unfortunately, sometimes we do have to call child services, but it should be done through a Jewish avenue. But unless that, again, back to the rule beforehand, I'm just thinking it's another way. If you know that this person's not going to listen to Rav, it's not dangerous. The kids are not being physical, they're not walking out with marks, but it's a little, emotional, and it could be dangerous for the kids in the future, right? So then you can't tell the Rav either, because the Rav is not going to be able to accomplish anything. Huh?
He probably knows.
And anyways, he probably knows anyways, but right, but back to our case, right, where the Rav could. Generally, the halakha is we're required to speak directly to the person first. We should reprove him in a manner that most likely be accepted, and try to awaken him to his mistakes. However, in some cases, we will only harden his position and put him in a defensive, so that he will less likely change his ways. In that situation, we should not speak to him directly, but rather go to a third party who can help. All right. So the Chafetz Chaim speaks about this. Again, same concept. Right. Even going directly to the person. Right, if you know that it's not going to make a difference, Chafetz Chaim says, right, you have to give, right, we said one of the ways before you go and speak to someone is that you have to speak to the person directly. right? If it's saying something about someone, now remember that was one of the categories, right? So he said, "Hanu dafka b'stama." That's only normal, right? If you know that he's not going to listen to his words, right, and he's not going to accept his tochacha, right? Then he doesn't have to give him rebuke. He doesn't have to go out and speak to the person. And then he goes into another category, which I don't want to get into, right? And therefore, right, very clearly, again, if you know that you're not going to listen, so then you're not accomplishing anything. And all you're doing is that this guy now knows that you're going to speak bad about him. You found something about him, and you're creating a animosity between you and him. Right? You go to the Rav, and the Rav says, "Hey, listen, someone said something I've been noticed, or like Emily said, it might be something that's apparent, or whatever it is, or he might not know. He might think that maybe it was you or not, but you don't know directly. And the Rav is someone that will keep his mouth shut. Right? So then you have to go to the Rav, right?" So I want to talk about this for a minute. It's very interesting, right? It says, right? It says in the Torah that you should rebuke your friend, but make sure there's no aveira, there's no chet, there's no sin, right? And there's many different explanations. What does that mean? You should give rebuke to your friend and make sure there's no sin, there's no aveira. Like, what does that mean? Right? So one of the beautiful ideas that is said that when you rebuke your friend, make sure that there's no aveira. What's that aveira? This that we're talking about right now. That he's not going to listen to you, and then it's a form of lashon hara. Because your lashon hara is even if you speak to the person directly, because he's not going to listen to you. Now he knows what you might say about him. Now you told him directly what you feel about him. So it's a form of lashon hara. It's not lashon hara directly because lashon hara is telling someone else about someone, right? But it's a form of lashon hara. Say the commentaries, that is what it means. This idea that we're speaking right now is in the Torah. The Torah is alluding to this concept that you're not allowed to tell someone something if you know they're not going to listen to you, because all you're doing is creating animosity, hatred, a fight, a machlokes between the two of you. But I feel I have to say something. I've heard this from people. I feel I just have to say something. You know what? Control yourself. Right? Just because something you feel doesn't mean to say it's the right thing. Control yourself. Right? Control yourself. Not everything that you feel you should be saying. And it has to be within the guidelines of the Torah. And therefore, say the commentaries so many times, right? So many times, and we have to educate our kids also, because sometimes kids say something to someone else, "Oh, this, you did that, or you did," and the kids are not going to listen to the other kid, right? And all it does is creates, well, you know what that kid said about me, and creates a friction between them. That's not better to go tell an adult, a teacher, or whatever that could accomplish something, right? If the kids are really close and they could talk and they're already more mature, right, and they could talk it over, so then yes, encourage them to talk to each other. And we've done it. Encourage them to talk to each other, have a conversation, say what you feel, say how you feel, and then try to help them make up. But if not, and then with adults also, just because you have a feeling about someone doesn't mean to say that you have to say it. Sometimes you have to hold it within yourself and try to just avoid the situation and move on. Because if they're not going to listen to you, then it's a lack of l'sisa lavchet. Let's just finish off. It's we're going to end today at 9:30 because we do have another class later, and I do have to prepare for it. Right. So just going to end off with a beautiful quote, right, which I think fits in very nicely to what we just said from the Alter of Kelm. Right, and he said like this: love of people is in itself becoming close to Hashem because you are following in His ways. We have to follow in God's ways. It's a quote on 123, right? You have to we have to follow in God's ways, and God loves each and every one of us, right? So by loving your fellow person, right? Every person, especially Jews, but every person, right? Loving every individual, right? Is following in God's ways, is a connecting with God. So when we reflect on that, and we want to build our relationship with God, and putting the two quotes together from the end to the beginning, we started off with having to try to find building our relationship with God, finding God to be more internally inside of ourselves, because the more we do that, the more we'll be embarrassed and we'll be able to have that sensitivity of not wanting to do something, because even though we might not holding there, but hey, we know God's watching us. We know God's around with us. God's in. We don't want to stoop to a lower level of where God won't be happy with me, right? The way to build God is by acting. And one of the ways to do that is by loving your fellow person, because the more you love your fellow person, the more you're following God's ways, the more you're putting God into our lives. All right, so let's reflect on everything we just spoke about, right? And build this Ahavat Yisrael, loving your fellow person, right? And hopefully we build our relationship with our Father in heaven. And through building our relationship with our Father in heaven, we build ourselves up. We start having, as we said, we start having the confidence to do things and not say, who am I, or who am I to speak up, or what will people think, but having the confidence to do the right thing, wherever one's holding, to tell friends, sorry, that's not a place that I'm comfortable going, right? Or family, right? Or say, sorry, that's not a conversation I want to have, right? I feel comfortable to do a mitzvah in public, even though, right, people might say something, whatever it is, because the more we build our relationship with our Father in heaven, the more we'll have those confidence, and the more we'll be able to restrain ourselves from saying, well, I just need to say that thing to that person. No, you don't. Control yourself. Wishing everybody a good day. Please feel free to join me later at 12:15. And again, it'll be only a half hour. So same Zoom code, same password. I look forward to seeing everybody.